The first time I caught Karen stealing my firewood, I thought I was imagining it. But the second time when I heard the sharp crack of a log dropping outside at 2 a.m. I knew something was wrong. I peeked through the blinds, and there she was, our neighborhood self-appointed HOA queen, wearing her neon pink robe like royal armor, creeping across my yard with an armful of wood she didn't even bother to hide. But here's the part that really grabbed me: the smirk. That smug, satisfied smirk, like she had just enforced some personal law of the universe. And in that moment, something snapped inside me. Because that firewood, I had chopped it myself. Every splinter, every bruise earned. Yet she strutted away with it like she was doing me a favor by lightening my load. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I watched. And what I saw over the next few nights turned irritation into full-blown fury. She stole from me again. And again. Enough times that I started leaving the blinds half open, just so I could witness the spectacle of her waddling off with my logs like a squirrel preparing for winter. But the real problem wasn't the theft itself. It was the HOA meeting that changed everything. Karen stood there at the front of the room pointing at me, accusing me of improper wood pile storage, saying my firewood was creating visual clutter, and threatening me with a fine. All while she had stacks of my logs hidden behind her house. That was the moment the idea formed. A stupid idea. A petty idea. But oh, such a beautifully satisfying one. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. More firewood. Except this batch would be different. I started hollowing out logs carefully, slowly, quietly, until they were just shells. I filled each one with a tiny sprinkle of gunpowder, nothing dangerous, just enough to create a blast of smoke and a loud pop when thrown into a fire. Enough to scare her. Enough to make her stop. I sanded them, stained them, and stacked them right on top of the pile she always targeted. Then I waited. The kind of waiting where your heartbeat thumps in your ears and every rustle outside sounds like fate approaching. And when Karen finally returned that night, oblivious and greedy as ever, I watched her take the bait. I had no idea just how wild things were about to get. Karen didn't just steal the hollow logs, she took them with the confidence of someone who believed the universe itself owed her free firewood. I remember watching from the upstairs window, my heart pounding like a drum as she hauled away the rigged logs one by one. She didn't even bother sneaking this time. She strutted across my lawn as if she were collecting a prize she'd fairly won. The moonlight caught her robe again, making her look like some kind of villainous suburban sorceress. And all I could think was, this is it. The moment I've been waiting for. But the real show wouldn't happen in my yard. No, it would happen behind her house, where she kept a little patio fire pit, a rusted metal bowl she bragged about every summer. I knew she liked her evening relaxation time, a fancy term for sipping cheap wine near a tiny fire and judging anyone walking past. So I waited. And sure enough, as the night deepened, her backyard lights flickered on. I slipped quietly outside and moved along the fence line, careful not to crunch any leaves. Her yard smelled like lavender air freshener and burnt marshmallows. She was humming loudly off-key, as always, while arranging the logs in her fire pit. And right in the center of the pile, she placed one of mine. My hollowed-out masterpiece. She lit the fire. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Just the crackle of flame and the sound of her sipping wine. I almost thought the plan had failed. But then there was a faint hiss, subtle enough that I might have ignored it if I hadn't been waiting for it. Pop! A burst of white smoke exploded upward like a tiny volcano. Karen shrieked violently, dramatically, as if the earth itself had risen to attack her. Her wine glass flew into the bushes. She stumbled backward, tripping over her chair and landing in a heap of confusion and outrage. But the show wasn't over. Pop! 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 3 more hollow logs went off in rapid succession, sending smoke swirling around her patio like a haunted fog machine. Lights turned on in neighboring houses. Dogs barked. And through it all, Karen screamed her favorite word, violation. Violation. She ran inside so fast she left her slipper behind. I stood there behind the fence, trying not to laugh aloud. It was supposed to be a harmless scare, just enough to teach her a lesson. But I didn't expect what came next. Because Karen, humiliated and furious, wasn't done. She was about to turn this into the biggest neighborhood drama our HOA had ever seen. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing like a beehive on caffeine. Karen had already stormed to the HOA board, waving her arms and pointing fingers, recounting the Firewood explosion in dramatic detail. She claimed it was an act of sabotage, a targeted attack against her perfectly maintained lawn and her delicate sense of order. Her words were sharp, her tone theatrical, and somehow, the entire HOA seemed to hang on every syllable. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, sipping my coffee while scanning the headlines of suburban chaos that had erupted on our community chat group. Fire pit disaster at Karen's, who's responsible? One message read. Another, is Karen okay? Smoke all over the block. And a few daring neighbors even suggested she might have accidentally caused it herself. I smiled, silently enjoying the fact that my little prank had created more buzz than a new pool installation or a community bake sale. But Karen wasn't satisfied with digital outrage. No, she needed action. She sent a formal complaint, demanding surveillance cameras, fines, and even threats of legal action. Her fire pit incident became the centerpiece of her personal vendetta, and suddenly, everyone in the neighborhood had taken sides. Some called her overdramatic, some worried she might actually sue. But the best part? No one suspected me. Not yet. As the week went on, Karen's paranoia skyrocketed. She started checking every yard like a hawk, carrying her binoculars and walking past houses multiple times a day. Every log pile in the neighborhood became a potential threat in her eyes. Her own firewood stash. She counted it twice a day, obsessively inspecting for signs of sabotage. And I watched from my porch, amused and amazed at how a few hollow logs filled with gunpowder had completely unhinged her. But there was a lesson to learn here, beyond the laughter and chaos. I realized that sometimes, people take what isn't theirs because no one sets boundaries. And when you finally do, it doesn't have to be aggressive, it just has to be clever enough to make them think twice. Karen had been a thorn in my side for months, enforcing her own rules and trampling on mine. But one tiny, calculated move, and suddenly her rules were irrelevant. Still, even as I celebrated the victory from a safe distance, I couldn't ignore a creeping sense of anticipation. Karen wasn't the type to back down. This wasn't over. I could see it in her eyes when she stormed past my yard that morning, muttering threats and promises that only she understood. She was planning her next move, and I had to be ready. The game had changed. The stage was set. And the final showdown was approaching. By the following weekend, the tension in the neighborhood had reached a fever pitch. Karen wasn't just angry, she was scheming. She had barricaded herself behind her windows, keeping binoculars trained on every yard, muttering to herself about revenge plots that only she seemed to understand. Every time I stepped outside, I felt her gaze, like a hawk circling its prey. I knew it was only a matter of time before she acted. I decided to be proactive. If Karen was planning something, I wanted to stay 2 steps ahead. I doubled my vigilance, hid extra logs in plain sight, and even left a few hollow decoys that were completely empty. No powder, no smoke. It was all psychological warfare now. The mere sight of a suspicious log pile could send her into a panic. And, frankly, it was satisfying to see her paranoia escalate without me having to lift a finger. The first confrontation came during the neighborhood barbecue, a supposedly peaceful Saturday event. Karen arrived in full armor, sun hat, gardening gloves, and a suspiciously large tote bag that rattled ominously. She marched toward my yard, voice raised, accusing me of continued harassment and threats to personal property. Everyone nearby froze, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch the spectacle. I stepped forward calmly, keeping my tone measured, letting her rage burn itself out. And then I made my move. I invited her to inspect my firewood pile. "Please," I said, "check for anything unusual. Make sure it's safe." Karen's eyes gleamed. This was her chance to prove me guilty. She started poking, lifting, and examining logs with obsessive care, muttering about safety violations. And that's when the magic happened. She found the hollow decoys. No smoke. No pop. Just empty wood, harmless and perfectly stacked. Her face shifted from anger to confusion, then to outright embarrassment as neighbors laughed quietly behind her. In that moment, the scales tipped. Karen realized that her paranoia had been manipulated. Her reputation took a subtle hit, while mine remained intact. She stormed off, flustered and muttering about next time, but it was clear she had been outsmarted. The firewood war was over, not with violence, but with strategy, patience, and a little creativity. From then on, Karen avoided my yard entirely. She kept her distance, and I finally had peace. The hollow logs remained a legend in the neighborhood, a story of clever revenge, a prank that taught lessons without causing real harm. And me? I learned that sometimes, standing your ground isn't about confrontation, it's about thinking smarter, planning ahead, and having the patience to let karma unfold on its own timetable. The firewood war had ended, but the story lived on, one of the most satisfying victories I'd ever experienced.